A cold wind blew through the city park that Sunday morning, scattering leaves across the empty walking paths. Children's laughter rang faintly from the distance. Dogs barked at pigeons near the fountain, and couples strolled hand in hand, sipping hot coffee. But at the far end of the park, where the benches were old and forgotten, a man with a weathered army jacket and a missing leg sat quietly beneath a tree, his crutches leaning beside him. "Hey, you, what the hell do you think you're doing here?" barked a young security guard named Travis, storming up the path. His mirrored sunglasses reflected the hunched figure of the man on the bench, and his lips curled into a sneer. The man looked up slowly. His face was lined with age and sorrow, his beard unshaven and peppered gray. He was maybe in his late 50s or early 60s, but war had aged him beyond his years. His name was Samuel Price. "I'm just sitting," Samuel said quietly, his voice calm, deep, and tired. "Is that a crime? Now?" Travis didn't like his tone. "We've had complaints. People say you're making the place look bad, you're scaring kids, you need to leave." "I didn't ask anyone for anything. I'm not causing trouble. Just needed a place to rest my leg," Samuel replied, gesturing toward the stump below his knee. "Yeah, and I need you to move it along. Go find a shelter or a corner to beg on. This park is for families, not vagrants." Samuel's fingers tightened on his crutches. "I served this country. I lost my leg in Kandahar. I bled for this flag. You think I want pity? I'm just asking for a little peace." Travis snorted. "Yeah, I've heard that one before. Every bum's a hero when they want sympathy. You've got 30 seconds to get out of here before I call backup." A woman nearby had stopped walking. Her name was Maria Delgado, a nurse from the local VA hospital. She'd been watching the exchange, her eyes narrowing with growing discomfort. She stepped forward, her voice firm. "Excuse me," she said, "but he's not bothering anyone." "This doesn't concern you, lady," Travis snapped. "I'm handling a disturbance." "Disturbance?" Maria's tone rose. "That man is a veteran. He has a right to sit here like anyone else. Look, do you want trouble?" Travis warned, reaching for his radio. Samuel stood slowly, struggling to balance on one crutch, pain etched in every line of his face. "It's fine," he said, voice low. "Let him feel big. I've had guns pointed at me by real enemies. This is nothing." But Maria wasn't done. She turned to Travis, eyes flashing. "Do you even know who he is?" "That's Sergeant First Class Samuel Price, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts. He saved his whole unit from an ambush in Afghanistan. And you're telling him to leave a public bench." Travis paused. "You're joking." "I'm not," she said, voice trembling. "I know him. I work at the VA. He's a hero." Samuel sighed. "Let it go, Maria. It doesn't matter." "No," she said, stepping in front of him. "It does. People should know." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Joggers slowed. A man pushing a stroller stopped. People murmured, confused and curious. An older gentleman in a fedora squinted at Samuel. "Wait, Sam Price. You're that Sam Price. The one from the news years ago. The one who pulled 3 soldiers from a burning Humvee." Samuel gave a reluctant nod. A teenage boy whispered to his father, "Dad, that's the guy from the documentary. I saw him on YouTube. He was a sniper too." "Right?" Travis looked flustered. He stammered, "Look, I didn't know. No one said." Maria cut in. "You didn't ask. You judged him by how he looked, like most people do." Samuel sat back down, weary. "It's all right. I'm used to it. Most folks see the crutches, the coat, and think I'm trash." An elderly black woman pushed her walker closer. "Baby," she said gently to Samuel, "you're not trash. You're a soldier. You're my hero." A man in a business suit, watching from the bench across, stood up and walked over. "Sergeant Price," he said formally, "my brother was in Kandahar. He told stories about you. You saved his life. If you ever need anything at all, here's my card." Samuel took the card slowly, uncertain. And then, as if something had shifted in the air, people began approaching. A young girl handed him a flower. A teenage boy offered him his sandwich. A mother knelt beside her daughter and said softly, Sweetheart, shake his hand. Say thank you. Samuel blinked, overwhelmed. I didn't do it for applause, he muttered. The crowd parted as a city official in a suit arrived, drawn by the commotion. His name was Deputy Mayor Rob Whitaker. What's going on here? He demanded. Travis stepped forward, pale. There was a situation. I asked him to leave. But now, Maria interrupted. He didn't cause any trouble. You're about to remove a decorated war hero from a public park for resting his prosthetic leg. Think carefully. Rob looked at Samuel. Recognition dawned. Wait, he said slowly. You're Samuel Price. Samuel nodded. Rob approached him, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Price, I, on behalf of the city, I'm deeply sorry. This shouldn't have happened. Please, allow us to save it, Samuel said flatly. Don't apologize because people are watching. Apologize because it's wrong. Rob hesitated. You're right. A beat passed. Rob turned to the crowd. This man deserves our respect, not our judgment. Effective immediately. I'm calling for a formal commendation ceremony to honor Sergeant Price's service. The crowd clapped. Travis lowered his head, speechless. But Samuel just shook his head. I don't need a ceremony. I need to be seen as a person. Not a problem. Rob nodded. Then let's start with this. Sergeant Price, this bench, this park is yours as much as anyone's. Stay as long as you like. In fact, he looked around. How about we rename this bench in his honor? Cheers erupted. Samuel's eyes welled. He looked at Maria, at the faces around him, at the child still clutching his flower. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. But this was only the beginning. 3 days later, the story had gone viral. News crews camped at the park. Headlines read, Hero Vet kicked out. City rushes to apologize. Talk shows replayed Maria's confrontation with Travis. Thousands poured into the VA with donations. Samuel received letters, gifts, and invitations to speak. He refused most of them, until one evening, a letter arrived from a boy named Marcus. It read, Dear Mr. Price, I'm 12. My dad died in the war. I always thought soldiers were forgotten, but you showed me that people do remember. I want to be like you. Please don't stop sharing your story. We need heroes. Love. Marcus Samuel stared at the letter for a long time. He picked up the phone. Maria, he said, you still want me to come speak at the high school? She gasped. You'll do it, he nodded. I think it's time. And so he spoke. At schools, churches, DA centers, his words were not polished, but they were real. I lost my leg-guide eyes. But what hurt more was losing my purpose. Until I remembered that being a soldier doesn't end at discharge. We still fight every day. For dignity, for truth, for each other. People wept, applauded, hugged him. The city gave him a job at the VA, working with other disabled vets. Travis, fired from the park, showed up at one of his talks months later. Afterward, he approached Samuel, eyes low. I was wrong, he said. I judged you. I'm sorry. Samuel studied him. What are you doing now? Volunteering. At the shelter. Trying to do better. Samuel reached out and shook his hand. Good, he said. That's all any of us can do. And every day after, Samuel returned to the same bench in the park, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because it had become a symbol of resilience, of recognition, of the truth that heroes don't always wear capes or even uniforms. Sometimes they sit quietly with one leg and 1,000 memories, hoping the world will one day see them. Now they did. But recognition is a strange thing. It warms the soul, yet it does not fill the emptiness that war leaves behind. Even as the city hailed him, even as children saluted and veterans embraced him with tears in their eyes, Samuel Price sometimes sat on that bench in silence, staring into the distance, haunted by the screams, the fire, the sound of choppers slicing through hot desert air. One afternoon, as autumn leaves began to fall again, Samuel sat with a worn notebook in his lap. He had begun to write not for the world, but for himself. pages filled with names of comrades, memories of firefights, moments of fear, and flashes of courage. He wasn't sure if anyone would read them. He wasn't even sure if he wanted them to, but writing gave the ghosts a place to rest. Maria visited often, bringing coffee and talking about anything but war books, movies. The stubborn new interns at the VA. She had become his closest friend. Her laughter, gentle and genuine, reminded him of what life could still offer. One day, she sat beside him and asked, "Do you ever think about going back to your hometown?" He looked at her with a sad smile. "Not much to go back to. My folks are gone. My brother, well, he stopped writing when I enlisted. Said I was chasing glory. We haven't talked in years." Maria touched his hand. "Maybe it's time." "Maybe," he said, staring at the horizon. "But I'm not ready yet." That weekend, a new figure came to the park, a boy in his late teens, tall and lanky, with big eyes and a folded piece of paper in his hand. He hovered near the bench, nervous. Samuel noticed him. "You looking for someone?" The boy stepped closer. "Are you Sergeant Price?" "Used to be," Samuel replied. "Now I'm just Sam." The boy smiled shyly. "My name's Marcus. The first wrote you that letter a while ago about my dad." Samuel's eyes widened. "Marcus, you came. I wanted to meet you." Marcus said, You kind of changed my life." Samuel motioned for him to sit. "Tell me about your dad." They sat for over an hour, trading stories. Samuel listened intently as Marcus described how his father had joined the army, how he died on his third tour, and how no one at school really understood what it meant to be a soldier's kid. "I used to feel invisible," Marcus said. "But when I saw your story, I realized I wasn't alone." Samuel placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not. And your father, he'd be proud of you." Marcus's voice cracked. "I want to serve one day. Like him, like you. You'll do it better," Samuel said, "because you'll carry his spirit and your own." As the boy left, Maria appeared again. She had seen the whole exchange. "You have a gift, Sam," she said. "You give people hope." "I'm just talking," he said. "No," she corrected him. "You're healing people, including yourself." That night, Samuel dreamed of Kandahar, but this time, it wasn't the ambush or the blood. It was the laughter of his brothers in arms, the teasing, the late-night talks under the stars. For once, the memory wasn't pain, it was warmth. The next morning, he picked up his phone. He stared at the number for a long time. Then he called. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Tom," Samuel said. "It's me." A pause. "Sam." "Yeah." Another pause. Then, a trembling voice. "I thought you were dead." "I almost was. But I'm still here." "I'm sorry," Tom said. "I shouldn't have pushed you away." "I shouldn't have stayed away," Samuel replied. "Let's fix that." They spoke for 2 hours. About childhood. About their parents. About the years between them. And when Samuel hung up, he sat in silence, letting the tears fall freely, not of pain this time, but of peace. Weeks later, the city held the ceremony Rob Whitaker had promised. They unveiled a bronze plaque on the bench, engraved with the words, "In honor of Sergeant First Class Samuel Price, a soldier, a survivor, a symbol of strength." Hundreds attended. Samuel stood before them, cane in hand, suit pressed, medals shining. He took the microphone and looked out over the crowd. "I was once told that after war, a man either lives in the past or fights for the future. I spent too long in the past. But thanks to all of you, I've remembered what the future can be. Not easy, not perfect, but worth fighting for." The crowd erupted in applause, and in the front row, Marcus stood tall, saluting. Samuel returned the salute. The next chapters of his life unfolded quietly but meaningfully. He started a small foundation called Silent Ranks, aimed at supporting homeless and disabled veterans. With Maria's help, they found housing for dozens, jobs for even more, and dignity for all. Travis, now employed at a halfway house, became one of their most committed volunteers. He gave talks about bias, about judgment, and about change. "I was the guy who saw a man on a bench, and thought he was nothing, he'd say. He turned out to be everything I wasn't, and he forgave me. Samuel's story was taught in local schools. Not the military part, the human part, the resilience, the quiet strength, the way he sat on a bench and changed lives without asking for anything. He never stopped visiting the park. One winter morning, snow dusted the grass and frozen pond. Samuel sat on his bench, bundled in his old army jacket. He watched kids throw snowballs, couples skate, dogs chase sticks. Maria arrived with 2 cups of hot chocolate. Cold one today, she said. I don't mind, he replied. This bench is warm enough, she smiled. You ready for your TV interview tomorrow? He groaned. Do I have to? People need to hear your story. They've heard enough. No, she said gently. They've only just begun listening. Samuel stared at the horizon again, once. He'd seen it as the edge of memory, of pain, of isolation. Now, he saw it as a new day. He took a sip of cocoa, leaned back, and exhaled, peaceful, grounded, whole, and though no parade marched through the park, though no trumpets sounded, those who passed the bench and paused, those who knew, felt the quiet presence of a true hero. Not just because of what he had done, but because of how he chose to live after. Spring returned with quiet grace, melting the snow, breathing life into trees once bare, and painting the city park with vibrant color. The bench under the great elm, now known as Sam's Spot by the locals, stood as a quiet monument, not of war, but of healing. Children played near it without fear. Veterans came to sit beside it, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation, always leaving with a little more than they came with. Samuel Price became something of a legend, not in the loud, spotlight craving way of television heroes, but in the gentle reverence that communities carry for someone who has given them something priceless: hope, strength, humanity. One afternoon, as he sat reading a letter from another young veteran, trying to find his place in the world, a familiar voice called out, "Uncle Sam." Samuel looked up in surprise. A young woman with curly hair and warm brown eyes jogged toward him, holding a toddler by the hand. Keisha. Samuel's face lit up. Look at you, she threw her arms around him. I saw the news, the bench, the foundation, everything. I had to come. He laughed. Overcome. The last time I saw you, you were still in braces. I know. And now I've got this little rascal, she said, nudging her giggling son forward. Meet Elijah, your grandnephew. Samuel knelt down with effort, smiling at the child. Elijah, huh? That's a strong name. Just like the man I named him after, Keisha said, her voice soft. They sat and talked for hours, the sun casting long shadows through the budding trees. Samuel shared stories from his youth, some funny, some hard. Keisha shared her own trials, raising a son alone, juggling work and night school. You inspired me, she said. When I saw your story, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I started pushing harder. Samuel looked away, eyes glistening. You're the reason I kept going. People like you, Marcus, Maria. You reminded me what still matters. That evening, Maria joined them, bringing food from her favorite Cuban place. They laid out a small picnic, laughter echoing into the twilight as Elijah chased butterflies around the bench. Later, as stars blinked into the sky, Samuel gazed upward and whispered to no one in particular, "Still here." It wasn't long after that he received a letter marked with the seal of the Department of Defense. At first, he thought it was some bureaucratic nonsense, but when he opened it, his hands trembled. He had been selected to receive the Presidential Citizens Medal for his continued service to veterans and communities across the nation. Maria read it 3 times to be sure. Sam, this is huge. You'll be standing next to the president. I'd rather stand right here, next to this bench, he said with a chuckle. But I'll go, not for the medal, for the message. The ceremony was grand, as expected. Press, politicians, applause. Samuel stood tall in a new suit provided by a veterans charity, cane polished, eyes clear. When the president handed him the medal, Samuel spoke briefly but powerfully. I once thought my story ended the day I left the battlefield. I was wrong. It began again when someone reminded me that my worth wasn't in the uniform I wore, but in the heart I carried forward. Every forgotten soldier, every broken body, every silent scream, they matter. We matter. And as long as I breathe, I'll keep reminding the world. The standing ovation shook the room. But Samuel was glad to return to his bench, his park, his people. Weeks later, he was approached by a group of filmmakers wanting to turn his life into a documentary. He hesitated only if it tells the whole story, the fear, the loneliness, the ignorance I faced. The people who helped me rise again, they agreed. The documentary, titled The Man on the Bench, premiered in small theaters before gaining national attention. Schools played it during assemblies. Universities used it in ethics classes. The message spread: judgment is easy. Understanding takes courage. The ripple effect was profound. The cities across the country began auditing how their public spaces treated the homeless and disabled. New legislation was drafted protecting veterans from discrimination. Sam's foundation, Silent Ranks, expanded into 5 new states. Maria became its national director, and through it all, Samuel remained at the heart of it, quiet, humble, present. One summer day, a familiar face returned Travis, the former security guard. He stood by the bench, not quite knowing what to say. Samuel smiled. Back again. I wanted you to know. I became a counselor for vets with PTSD. Got certified last month. Samuel nodded, pleased. That's real work. I never would have done it if you hadn't looked me in the eye and shook my hand that day. You could have humiliated me, but you didn't. You were angry, lost. I've been there. Can I sit? Travis asked. Samuel gestured. This bench is for everyone. They sat in silence for a while. 2 men who had once been enemies in a way neither of them had understood, and now co-conspirators in healing a broken system. As the years passed, Samuel slowed down. His walks became shorter. His time at the bench grew longer. People still came: veterans, students, politicians, even tourists. They came not to take pictures, but to talk, to listen, to feel seen. One rainy day, Maria found him dozing peacefully on the bench, a blanket over his lap, a soft smile on his face. She didn't wake him immediately. Instead, she sat beside him, listening to the gentle patter of rain on leaves, the sound of wind through the trees. She looked at the man beside her, not broken, not forgotten, but whole, at peace, and more alive than most people ever get to be. Eventually, Samuel stirred. Did I miss anything? He asked. Just another day in paradise, Maria replied. I'll take it. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small box, and handed it to her. What's this? Open it. Inside was a modest silver pin, engraved with the words, "For those who see the unseen." Maria stared. Sam, I had it made. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. Now it's your turn to wear something shiny. She laughed through tears. You old fool. He leaned back, letting the rain wash over his boots. I think I've done enough for this life, he murmured. If I go tomorrow, I'll go proud. You're not going anywhere, Maria said. We've got a school tour next week. And he didn't, not yet. Samuel Price lived many more seasons, each one richer than the last. He saw Marcus graduate with honors and enter military service. He watched Elijah grow into a brilliant artist who painted a mural of Sam on the wall of City Hall. He walked Keisha down the aisle at her wedding, tears streaming down his face. And every year, on Veterans Day, the city gathered at his bench. No speeches, no parades, just stories, laughter, and remembrance. When the day finally came, peaceful, quiet, with a book in his lap and the birds singing above the city, mourned as one. The bench was covered in flowers. A new plaque was added beneath the first. He gave us more than courage. He gave us each other. And somewhere beyond the pain, beyond the battlefield, beyond the park benches and medals, Samuel Price rested at last, his mission complete, his legacy eternal. Because sometimes the strongest soldiers are the ones who keep fighting long after the war is over. And sometimes a man on a bench can change the world. Years passed. The bench, now known to everyone simply as Sam's bench, became a sacred place, not in any religious sense, but in the way that quiet spaces become sacred through the lives they've touched. Every season, it saw new faces. Veterans with haunted eyes would sit where Sam once sat, some with missing limbs, some with invisible wounds. Parents brought their children to tell them the story of the man who didn't give up. Artists sketched the view from that bench. Poets wrote verses about it. Lovers sat hand in hand and shared silence. But the most important visitors were the ones who came alone, without cameras or fanfare, those who were broken, tired, invisible. They'd come, sit down, read the plaques, and feel, perhaps for the first time in years, that they belonged somewhere. Maria, now older but no less fierce, returned to the bench often. Every year on the anniversary of Sam's passing, she left a small paper crane on the seat, folded by hand. It had been something Sam once told her he'd seen children do in war. Zones, fragile symbols of peace, made in the midst of chaos. On the 10th anniversary, she stood in front of a crowd gathered in the park. She wore the silver pin Sam had given her. "I'm not going to speak long," she said, holding back tears. Sam wouldn't have wanted that. But I'll tell you one thing. When he sat on this bench that day, exhausted, angry, ready to give up, none of us knew what was about to begin. We thought we were watching a sad ending. Instead, we witnessed a powerful beginning. He didn't change the world by shouting. He changed it by sitting, by staying, by choosing to be visible when everything in him wanted to disappear. And in doing so, he made the rest of us see. The crowd applauded quietly, reverently. Then, one by one, people began to share their stories. A young man stepped forward. "I was homeless, addicted. I read about Sam and came to this bench. I sat here and I felt him with me. That was the day I decided to try again. I'm 3 years clean now." An older woman nodded. "My husband served 2 tours, came back and wouldn't speak to anyone. One day, I brought him here. He sat for hours, didn't say a word. Then he whispered, 'I think I'm ready.' Sam helped him open up. A teenage girl stepped forward, clutching a sketch pad. 'I never knew him, but I come here to draw. I feel safe here, like I'm seen.' The stories continued for hours, testimonies not just to a man, but to an idea that no one is too broken, that healing is possible, that the simplest acts, listening, seeing, sitting, can change a life. The city eventually created a memorial garden around Sam's bench, filled with flowers representing service and resilience, poppies, forget-me-nots, lavender. In the center stood a new statue, life-sized, bronze, of Sam seated exactly as he often had been, cane at his side, gaze forward, as if still listening to anyone willing to speak. And etched into the base were his own words from his last speech: "Don't salute me. Sit with me. Talk to me. Fight for the forgotten with me." Veterans from across the country traveled to sit beside that statue, some with wreaths, others with nothing but their silence. Marcus, now an officer in the army, came every year on the day he first met Sam. He brought Elijah, now a tall, quiet teenager, who carried his sketchbook and often drew the statue from different angles. One year, he left a folded American flag on the bench. The next, a charcoal portrait of Sam's smile. One summer, the city declared that day Sergeant Samuel Price Day. Flags flew at half-mast in the morning, then rose in the afternoon to full staff, not for mourning, but in celebration of a man who taught them what dignity looked like. On the 20th anniversary of the original incident, the day Sam was almost kicked out of the park, a documentary crew returned. This time, they didn't just film the statue or the bench. They filmed the people, dozens, hundreds, who came to honor him. When asked why they were there, many simply said, "Because he made us feel like we mattered." In a quiet corner of the park, Maria sat beneath the elm, Her hair was fully silver now. In her hands was Sam's old notebook, the one he'd started writing after the park incident. She had kept it safe all these years. That day, she opened it to the last page. There, in Sam's unmistakable handwriting, was a single sentence: "Even if no one sees me, I will see them." Maria smiled, her heart full, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden light over the bench, the trees, and the people gathered there. A breeze rustled the leaves, almost as if the earth itself were exhaling. Somewhere, in that quiet wind, in the laughter of a child, in the soft sobs of a man remembering his brothers, in the nod of a stranger passing by, Samuel Price lived on, not in marble or metals, but in every person who sat down beside someone hurting and stayed. Because that was the legacy of the man on the bench. He didn't wait for the world to see him. He became the eyes the world needed. And so, the legacy of Samuel Price transcended generations. Years turned to decades. The skyline around the park changed: taller buildings, smarter lights, quieter cars, but the bench remained. Maintained with care by the city, protected like a relic, it became a destination not just for locals, but for travelers from across the globe, veterans from distant countries, students doing reports on empathy, journalists, poets, even politicians. Each came to sit, reflect, and write their own chapters in the silence. Sam had once made sacred. The park itself was renamed Sergeant Samuel Price Memorial Park. The surrounding garden flourished year-round, maintained by volunteers who had once been beneficiaries of Sam's foundation. Some had once been homeless, others addicts, some abandoned by society. Now they came with shears and watering cans, planting tulips in the spring, chrysanthemums in the fall. Sam's foundation, silent ranks, had grown beyond anyone's dreams. It now offered nationwide counseling, job placement, peer mentorship, and housing for veterans. In every center was a photo of Sam seated on the bench, eyes full of both pain and peace, and his words inscribed, "This is not charity, it's dignity returned." Maria, though older and moving slower, still visited the park every Sunday. She'd come early, with her usual offering, a folded paper crane and a small thermos of black coffee, and sit beside the statue. Sometimes she talked to him out loud. Sometimes she simply sat. One morning, she was joined by Elijah, now in his 30s, an acclaimed artist known for his raw, soul-stirring murals of forgotten heroes. He sat quietly beside her. "I've been asked to paint something big," he said. "Downtown, City Hall. They want a piece about sacrifice and resilience." Maria looked at him, her smile knowing. "You already know who it's about." He nodded. "But I don't want to just paint his face. I want people to feel what he gave us." Maria pulled out Sam's notebook, now encased in protective plastic sheets. She opened to a page near the middle. Gently, "Elijah, this might help." He read the passage. "I used to think my scars made me broken. Now I know they make me a map. If someone sees where I've been, maybe they won't get lost where they're going." Elijah sat still for a long time, his hands gently gripping the pages. "I'll start tonight." The mural would become one of the most famous in the country, a sprawling, emotional masterpiece of layered faces, each representing a soul Samuel had touched. Marcus in uniform, Travis holding a therapy group sign, Maria with her silver pin, a faceless man placing a flower on the bench. In the center stood Sam, not triumphant, not in a pose of grandeur, but simply seated, cane by his side, eyes gazing forward, hands resting loosely on his knees, watching, waiting, welcoming. When the mural was unveiled, Marcus, now a colonel and father of two, gave a speech. Samuel Price didn't win battles with bullets. He won them with presence, with truth. When I was lost, he sat beside me. No lectures, no pity, just presence. That's all most of us need, someone to sit beside us until we're strong enough to stand. The mural was declared a national monument. The Smithsonian requested a digital replica. Schools began printing smaller versions for classrooms. People from every background, veterans, immigrants, disabled citizens. Students saw themselves in the faces Sam's life had shaped. And still, back in the park, the original bench remained. Late one winter's evening, Maria came for what would be her final visit. Her steps were slow, but steady. In one hand she carried a thermos. In the other, a letter sealed in a crisp white envelope with the words, "To Sam," written in careful script. She sat beside the statue, letting the soft snow settle on her coat. "I'm tired, old friend," she whispered, "but I'm not sad, because you never really left us. Every time someone chooses kindness over judgment, you're there. Every time a broken soul finds their way back, it's because you lit the path." She placed the letter beneath the bench, protected in a plastic case, so others might one day read it. It read, "You once told me that being seen was all you ever wanted. I hope you know now you are seen by the world, and more importantly, by the hearts you healed. Rest easy, soldier." We're carrying the torch now. With love, always. Maria. She sipped her coffee slowly, then leaned against the statue and closed her eyes. She stayed until the stars appeared and the lights of the city flickered on like watchful sentries. The next morning, a city worker found the letter and placed it in the small glass display at the foot of the statue, where it became part of the permanent memorial. Time, as it always does, moved forward. Children who grew up visiting the bench grew into adults who brought their own children. Veterans now gone were remembered by friends who still visited, placing medals, flags, or simply a hand on the bench's armrest. And though Samuel Price was no longer there in body, his presence never faded. Because the truth is, heroes don't always wear capes or command armies. Sometimes they wear a faded jacket, walk with a cane, and carry a heart heavy with stories they'll never fully tell. Sometimes they sit on a bench when the world tells them to leave and stay long enough to change it. And in that staying, in that quiet defiance, in that extraordinary dignity, they show the rest of us how to live. Generations continued to pass. And still, every day, rain or shine, in winter frost or summer bloom, the bench was never empty for long. It became tradition, even custom, for visitors to the park to stop there before leaving. Some would sit for 5 minutes, others for hours. Some came to think, some to cry, some simply to be. A young woman named Amira, newly arrived from overseas, found the bench during her first week in the city. She had escaped war in her homeland, carrying only a backpack and a notebook. She was tired, frightened, alone. When she sat on the bench, she noticed the plaque. Curious, she pulled out her phone and looked up the name. 2 hours later, tears were rolling down her cheeks. She returned the next day and the day after. Soon, Amira began volunteering with silent ranks. "I never knew Samuel Price," she said at her first orientation, "but I felt him. The moment I sat where he once sat, I felt seen. And now, I want to do the same for others." And she did. Amira became the director of outreach programs for refugees and veterans, connecting the two groups through storytelling, shared meals, and art. She bridged worlds, using Sam's legacy as the bridge itself. One snowy December, an old man named Joseph arrived in the park. He had been estranged from his family for years. A veteran, lost in guilt, bitterness, and isolation. He sat down heavily on the bench, groaning as his knees protested. He stared at the statue for a long time. "You look like hell," he grunted at the bronze figure. He chuckled at himself, then muttered, "Me too." A passing child, maybe 6 years old, wandered over and looked at him curiously. "You okay, mister?" Joseph looked at the boy and, to his own surprise, nodded. "Yeah, kid, I think I will be." He stayed for hours. When he finally stood, he looked 10 years younger. He left his old dog tags on the bench's armrest, whispering, "I don't need to carry this alone anymore." Even now, at night, people say they sometimes hear soft footsteps near the bench when no one else is around. A breeze that moves through the trees, even when the air is still. a feeling not eerie, but comforting, as if someone unseen is still watching, still listening. On the 50th anniversary of the day, Sam was first kicked out of that very park. The city hosted its largest memorial yet. Hundreds gathered. Veterans, civilians, students. Many wore small pins in the shape of a paper crane. Marcus, now retired from the military, gray at the temples but still sharp-eyed, gave the keynote speech. 50 years ago, a man sat on a bench. He was tired, broken, dismissed, but he stayed. And in staying, he showed the rest of us the way. He paused, looking out over the crowd. Samuel Price didn't just give us a story, he gave us a standard, a measure of dignity, a call to action. Every time we stop to listen, to see, to sit with someone in pain, we carry his legacy forward. He pointed to the bench. This isn't just wood and metal. It's a place of remembering, a place of beginning. As dusk fell, candles were lit across the park, each one representing a life changed, a burden lifted, a hand held, and in the warm glow, beside the statue, stood a new addition, a tall, slender sculpture of Maria, holding a paper crane in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, her gaze resting gently on Sam. A plaque beneath it read, "She sat beside him, so that none of us would have to sit alone." The crowd fell silent. Then, one by one, they stepped forward to lay something at the base of the statue. Medals, notes, sketches, photos, folded cranes, dog tags, flowers, and one final letter, placed there by Elijah, now a father himself. It read, "Dear Uncle Sam, I tell my daughter stories about you. She calls you the quiet giant. She's 6. And every time she passes someone sitting alone, she asks me if she should go sit with them. I tell her yes. So, you see, you're still here, still making the world softer, stronger, kinder. Thank you for staying on the bench that day. Thank you for changing everything. We love you, Elijah." And as the candlelight flickered and the wind stirred softly through the trees, a single paper crane took flight from someone's open palm, floating upward, catching the golden light carried by the wind toward the horizon. And those who saw it swore. For just a moment, the statue of Samuel Price smiled. Years rolled on, and with each sunrise over Sergeant Samuel Price Memorial Park, the city itself seemed to breathe deeper, kinder. The bench remained. It had been reinforced over time, rebuilt with stronger materials, sealed with care against the elements. Yet they kept its weathered appearance, its character, for all the digital advancements of the world around it, flying drones, smart cars, and AI-guided city lights. Sam's bench stayed humbly analog, a simple place where anyone, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, could sit and be equal. Even tourists, who at first came out of curiosity, left differently. Something about the place demanded respect. Across the street from the park, a new structure rose, a national center for veterans' dignity and storytelling, inspired directly by Sam's life, funded by a coalition of donors, veterans' families, and former students touched by Sam's legacy. It housed archives of letters, photos, testimonies, and even Sam's original worn notebook, preserved behind glass like a sacred relic. Inside the center, visitors followed an immersive path that began with the park confrontation and ended with personal stories from people across the globe who had been inspired by Sam's courage, humility, and presence. One exhibit, titled "The Day the World Sat Down," replicated Sam's bench under artificial trees, where audio recordings played real letters sent to the foundation, many from children, others from soldiers, some from inmates, and even former enemies. "I once hated everything and everyone." One letter read aloud in a gruff voice. "Then I read about a man who forgave a guard who humiliated him in public. That day, I looked in the mirror and decided to be better." Every year, the foundation invited young leaders, artists, activists, and soldiers to walk through the exhibit and write what the bench meant to them. One visitor, a young amputee named Riley, who had lost her leg in a training accident, stood before Sam's statue afterward and whispered, "Thank you for making me feel whole again." And as years stacked gently like old leaves in autumn, Samuel Price became more than a man. He became a symbol, a kind of modern saint, not of religion, but of radical compassion. Children were taught his story in school, not just for history, but for ethics. Teachers would ask, what would Sam do? When discussing bullying, exclusion, or empathy, it wasn't a slogan, it was a compass. On the 75th anniversary of the park incident that started it all, a global vigil was held. Cities across the world, from Tokyo to Toronto, from Nairobi to New Orleans, organized bench moments where people sat in public parks beside strangers and simply listened. The idea was simple: 1 hour, no phones, no speeches, just presence. In that moment, across time zones and cultures, millions of people connected through the quiet act of doing what Sam had done on a cold morning long ago, sitting still and refusing to look away from another's pain. And back in the original park, now carefully preserved as a historical site, a massive crowd gathered: veterans, teachers, children, the elderly, journalists, mayors, even a sitting president. They didn't come for pageantry. They came to sit. Each brought a small folded crane. They laid them one by one around the base of Sam's statue, around Maria's sculpture, and on the arms of the bench. The grass was buried beneath thousands of colors: white, red, blue, gold, patterned with flowers or quotes or single names. And then the president stepped forward, flanked by veterans in wheelchairs, amputees standing tall, and children holding candles. She spoke simply, "Today we do not mourn, we remember. Today we do not pity, we honor. And today we do not speak over one another. We sit beside one another." She stepped back and sat down on the bench, one by one. The rest followed in total silence. The world's noise fell away, replaced by stillness, breath, presence. Overhead, drones recorded the moment from above. From that view, the cranes made a spiral around the bench, an accidental mosaic of color and reverence. And just then, the wind picked up. From the sea of paper birds, a few dozen lifted, caught by the breeze. They danced into the sky, twirling, soaring, carried beyond the trees. Past the buildings, into the clouds, people lifted their heads, eyes wide, mouths open, and once again, just as on that very first spring afternoon so long ago, those who watched swore. The statue of Samuel Price smiled, not because he was being honored, but because, at last, the world had learned to sit and see and stay.